So today I want to talk about Notion. Now, I'm usually a very set on paper and pencil type of person. I've always preferred to brainstorm and journal and write and do everything in the traditional way. I've never really taken well to ebooks. It's always it has to be something physical. But I've been using Notion since about the start of the year to try it out because it's been recommended all over my YouTube and all the productivity people talk about it. And it seems pretty popular as a project management tool and used for study, taking notes, and keeping yourself organized. It's been kind of promoted as the ultimate productivity tool. So I have to try it out. And yeah, so this video I wanted to give my opinion on it and whether it does help me be more organized and productive. But yeah, so first of all, I'm going to talk about all the good things I liked about Notion. These are the things I think quite a few other people have mentioned, but I guess it's worth hearing it from someone who isn't sponsored by them. So first of all, I found it extremely easy to use. I found it pretty intuitive and it was pretty easy to switch between different views. So if you wanted to have information in a table, you can switch it to a gallery view, different cards, lists, things like that. But it did take some time to get used to the way the data is structured, I guess, how the pages work and how you can click on information within a table and it'll open up as a page, things like that. I guess the differences between databases and pages and how the organizing structure of it works. Another good thing about it is that it's online, so it automatically backs up all your data. And it's great because you don't have to worry about losing any of it, but I mean, it's not always a good thing because it is online. But still, it's really easy to access on your laptop or phone, and I think it's really handy because sometimes I need to write down information, say a room number or appointment, and these are the things I kind of need to remember on the go. And then if I write down my bullet journal, then sometimes it gets really annoying when I have to pull out this information and find my bullet journal, find the page where I wrote it on. Whereas with Notion, I can just pull out my phone and search for it. And I think it does actually help me organize some things better. So there are some things I feel like a spreadsheet would be more handy as opposed to manually doing up a table in a bullet journal, which I normally would use. And I think Excel would be the best way to do some things. But really sadly, I really don't like the interface of Excel. I find it kind of confusing, difficult to set up. I don't really know how the formulas work. I just know how to do the basics, filters and add stuff up, but that's pretty much it. But Notion, on the other hand, it's a more user-friendly way to deal with all the spreadsheet stuff because you can automatically make things like a tag or a checkbox or add a date, and you can move columns around, which I can't figure out how to do in Excel. There is that kind of room to get a bit more creative and more complicated with formulas as well. And I have been using just a couple of simple formulas to remind me when I need to follow up on some things. And the templates that I have found for Notion that are using all the formulas and stuff, they're a lot more kind of suited to my needs as opposed to Excel. It tends to be more businessy kind of work stuff. And I like how it's a form of a hybrid spreadsheet kind of software. So you can have a page that's full of different text and have multiple tables, lists and cards, even images, which is pretty handy if you want to have multiple things on one page, as opposed to just having everything as a table and then you have to kind of select out different cells if you want to put a picture in there or something. And it's been really handy for me because I usually like to have a table and then little kind of boxes of information to kind of explain a couple of things or just remind myself of certain things. And I find that way works and looks a lot better in Notion as opposed to Excel. Now, I'm a pretty visual person. I like things to look kind of nice and aesthetic and be user-friendly, otherwise I'm just not going to use it. Apart from that, Notion has been pretty helpful in helping me keep more active tabs on my projects. So bullet journaling is great and that's my go-to method to organize my life, but I found it kind of hard to keep track of certain things and other things that sort of change on daily or weekly monthly basis. And I guess the original idea is that Notion was created to be a project management tool. It makes sense that you'd use it to store and organize information that is constantly changing and constantly needs to be updated. So in my case, I've been using it to keep tab on my casual jobs, private tutoring when I was doing that. And it's been pretty handy to organize kind of my YouTube ideas from kind of start to finish. And I really kind of wish that I used it for my honors project. That would have been so handy. And I found Notion also really helpful, and I think I've sort of briefly touched on this, but I found it really helpful for kind of organizing information that I need to keep referring back to. So I would usually have like pages in my bullet journal dedicated to this, kind of like lists of things that I need to remember, like class information. And these are generally called collections in the bullet journal terms. And that's part of the reason why I'd have page numbers and an index at the start. But I'm usually always too lazy to implement that, so I never actually number my pages. And I find myself constantly having to flip through my bullet journal to find something. But with Notion, I found that a lot easier because I can just search up for the information in the search bar or just find it through the pages on the side. And I think Notion can really help you with processes. I guess this point kind of relates more to the point I've made about Notion being a project management tool. And definitely I found it really helpful for implementing processes for things. A great example is YouTube. I have like an ideas page, a scripts page, a calendar, and all of these things are interlinked, so it helps me kind of streamline the way that I make YouTube videos. So like I have a nice little process going for developing ideas, fleshing them out, writing like a script, filming, and then editing and uploading. And I definitely think that this is something that the bullet journal fails to do. Like, sure, I can list out a process for doing certain things, for completing a project, whether it's on YouTube or like a school assignment, and I can add tasks that would go onto each step and then follow it each time. But obviously with a pen and paper method, you can't really interact or change it. You'd have to cross it out or rewrite it. But with Notion, you pretty much have unlimited space to put down information. And you can create templates, which saves a lot of time from having you to list out the information again. And now for some things that I'm not a huge fan of, or things that I feel that Notion is not as good as the things that I've been using already. So first of all, like I think it's really easy to get just way too into creating way too many pages for everything. Looking at the Notion subreddit, I feel like some people have the same problem as me. First of all, you find Notion that is great for organizing this one thing, and so you end up trying to create a bunch of pages to organize your entire life. And setting like all these things up takes a lot of time. You'll spend time making them nice, adding complicated formulas, features, all that good stuff. And supposedly this is all for the goal of being organized and productive. But is it actually helping you manage your time if all your time is spent on creating these pages? I had this thought that like, well, is it making me more productive or organized? Or just giving me a false sense of productivity that I'm working on creating these pages instead of working on the things that I'm actually meant to be working on. And I think with Notion, it's a lot easier to fall into this trap. Like I've spent days trying to create databases of information before I realized I might not actually even need a page or a database for that. Do I really need a page to track what series I watched on Netflix? Like, is that really adding to my life? And I'd also be wasting time creating pages that I didn't end up using. In the end, like that kind of makes me feel disorganized and overwhelmed because there's just way too many pages that are half finished or unused. And also I think that some things are easier on other platforms. So this is something I noticed with myself when I was trying to create way too many pages, and also looking at the Notion subreddit. People were creating pages for things like, let's say, tracking books that they've been reading, or organizing their bibliography, or using it for school notes. And it did cross my mind to use Notion in a similar way because, hey, like on one thing, it's great to have everything in one place. But on the other hand, it does take time to set up because there's some functionality is not implemented in Notion. And instead, there are apps designed specifically for these things. So a good example is Goodreads. Like, that's a great website to track what books you've been reading, what books you want to read. You can write reviews. There's no real reason why you'd want to create a Notion for your books. And to set that up in Notion, you need to do a bit more work in terms of setting up the formulas to kind of track, let's say, percentage of the books that you read or not. And so, yeah, Goodreads is like an already dedicated site for that. And I was also in the middle of making an exercise section on Notion, but then I realized like there's a whole heap of apps that do that exact thing. And like there's a lot of talk about like finding kind of different workarounds in order to have the kind of functionality that some apps and platforms already have to doing that thing. So like, is it a really good use of your time to try and integrate everything into one app? I do think it's something to think about, because I think the answer will be different for everyone depending on what you value, whether it is having everything in one place or saving time and just having dedicated sites for different things. And I'm not sure if this is too much of a criticism as it relates to my previous point about like the purpose of Notion, but I do find it hard to take notes in Notion. I use a lot of forward slashes in my writing, or backslashes, slashes, and that kind of triggers it to come up with like a menu, which like I don't want. And I also find it hard to copy text between pages. Like there's a duplicate function, but it just copies the text and pastes it below, whereas I just want to copy and paste it onto a different page. And I found OneNote a lot better for that kind of functionality, where you can move text around and manipulate it a bit easier compared to Notion. But that's because OneNote is a note-taking app. And yeah, like I guess Notion is not really intended to be used for note-taking. I guess it works decently well to kind of jot down basic information, but still it'd be nice to have a bit more usability when it comes down to text editing. Also, I found the phone version a bit hard to use in terms of like moving things around and editing text compared to the browser version. I haven't used the Windows app or the iPad tablet versions, but I guess like this isn't too much of a criticism, because Notion still works fairly decently on your phone if you just want to access information or just write things down. But if you want to create like tables and stuff, it's a lot easier to do it on a computer. Although like this is kind of a benefit, it is also a downside, is that it is online. So it's pretty hard to use if you don't have internet. So you can still work on things online if you have the page already open, and then it caches it and it'll sync up once you're back online. But that's pretty much it. And in my opinion, that's a pretty big issue, because I'm pretty used to accessing things offline. And definitely that's something to keep in mind if you're going to be in places where you don't have access to the internet, but you do need to use Notion. You obviously need some sort of device to access it on. And like, what if your battery dies or you don't have the device? You can't obviously access Notion. And that's why, in the end, I am biased towards pen and paper. And lastly, there are some things I think that need to be considered. The bottom line is, I don't think that using Notion will naturally make you more organized or more productive. And I think it's important to evaluate like whether it fits in with your other systems. So like for me, does it fit in with my Google Calendar and how I use my bullet journal? And also kind of like having a think about the process for streamlining information in your life. Is Notion just going to be another place for you to dump information like your email inbox or the Notes app on your phone? Like if you don't really have much of a process, or it doesn't really fit into that process of how you're going to re-access that information, then there's not much point in creating the page and storing that information, because you'll just forget about it. And it'll just be like another place for information to kind of collect, which we have way too many of in our day-to-day life. As with anything, I found Notion to be a useful tool depending on how I used it. So it doesn't make sense for me to use Notion as a bullet journal or instead of my bullet journal, because my bullet journal works really well already, and I'll be doubling up on something that I already know how to use almost intuitively. But so yeah, instead I've just been trying to find ways that Notion can complement the kind of organizational methods in my bullet journaling and time blocking that will help me enhance kind of the way that I work, instead of being like another place that I need to update or need to use. So yeah, like I do think it's pretty easy to get into the habit of dumping information in Notion for later, so it just becomes another pile of notes. And definitely it is good to evaluate whether it fits in with your other systems. So like if you already use a calendar or some other planner, perhaps you don't need to use Notion for that. Or like if you want to use it for work but your job already uses something, then wouldn't it be annoying to kind of like add extra work for you to do things in Notion and then in whatever software your job uses. So these were my thoughts. Thank you for watching. Comment down below if you use Notion and whether it has helped you in your life and what you think of this video. Thank you. Bye.